Good morning. What has 600,000 pounds of freight, 275 exhibits, spread over 2 campuses and the internet, over 200 plus speakers, and booking every hotel in Colorado Springs? It's the 37th Space Symposium. Good morning, my name is Rich Cooper with Space Foundation, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to Catch Space, our morning as well as afternoon wrap program that talks about what's happening at Symposium. It's a pleasure to welcome you, our virtual audience, to this program. I'm joined by Brian Berger of Space News and Tara Kopp of Defense One. We're going to give you a preview of what's going to be happening here at the symposium, because as you can imagine, with every symposium, there's always news happening. Today's kickoff day with the big speakers that we've got U.S. Air Force Secretary Kendall, we've got CSO General Raymond, we've got NASA Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, as well as Space Command's General Dickinson. But while we've got all those heavy hitters, there's also, I'll say, a tremendous sort of shadow over this. When we met in August, we had Afghanistan. We had the fall of Afghanistan and all the challenges that were occurring with the U.S. withdrawal from there. But here we are 7 months later, and we've got another shadow that's overseeing this particular program, and it's the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Tara, what are your thoughts as you've seen this start to unfold here, and how this is shadowing over what's happening here?
Well, Russia-Ukraine isn't just shadowing over what's happening on this showroom floor. It's touching every single exhibitor who's here, whether it's a commercial satellite vendor, whether it's military applications. All of these companies now have a new discussion, a new internal discussion going on in their own firms. Who do they do business with going forward? Is there going to be a new kind of bipolar break? Can you do business with either China and Russia, or can you do business with the US? And their roles from across, not only providing the satellite imagery in this war in real time, companies like Black Sky and Maxar and Hawkeye 360, what kind of position does that put them in? Does it put their company at risk?
Exactly. Brian, you and I, when we did this program this past August, again, we had Afghanistan falling apart. What are your observations as you've seen the Russia-Ukraine shadow over this year's program?
It's a different war for sure. There's a lot of non-state actors involved. The commercial satellite companies are providing imagery that's both for public consumption and is also having tactical value in the field. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, we're seeing satellite communications are coming into the arena, both to provide backup communications for Ukraine's primary infrastructure, but we're also finding that it is becoming a target surface. We saw that with Viasat had their system disrupted. Non-state actor, Russia, we don't know. But the timing is awfully coincidental.
Industry always plays a role in war. We know that. Again, the military-industrial complex. But this is really a new era in that industrial relationship with military. I don't think anybody picks up a newspaper or their phone and doesn't see an image from Planet or Maxar as to whether it's the 40-mile convoy or it is the mass graves or any of the other things that are going on there. It is interesting, though, the companies, again, there's a very, very public role that they're playing in ways that in the past may have been a little bit more muted, but this is being very forward-leaning. Love to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, this is real-time, wartime information, not only for the Ukrainians, but for the entire world, and shaping global opinion. And I think one of the really interesting aspects you're seeing here is when you have companies like Maxar and Hawkeye 360 providing these images, showing where jamming is occurring, you're actually taking part of the load off the U.S. military and allowing them to go do different things.
Yeah, and they're winning the information war. The West is winning the information war here. There's so much imagery documenting the atrocities going on over there. Russia doesn't have anything to counter it with, besides maybe Swan Lake.
You use, in our pre-discussion here before we went on the air, you use the analogy of the Lusitania.
Yeah.
Sure. Explain that, because again, I think we're always looking for historical examples to pull on here. That was one I hadn't heard, and I'd love to have you share it.
So if we're going to have Black Sky, Planet, Maxar satellites become a target for disruption, the question becomes, is that an act of war? And the U.S. has said in the past that if you fly on if you shoot on a U.S. chartered satellite, that is tantamount to an act of war. But now there's the possibility of having non-destructive attacks, whether you jam a satellite, whether you dazzle a satellite. That probably would not be treated as the same level of offense as blowing a ship out of the water, as shooting down a U.S. satellite, government or commercial.
When Again, it's a very, very dynamic environment. When we met here in August, there was no illusion on any of the presenters who were up there. In fact, it was General Hyten who put up both the Chinese flag and he put the Russian flag, and he said, all we have to do is listen. We know what they're going to do. I'm going to be very curious to see how this year's presenters, and again, some of them are the same people, whether they will be as overt in what they say. What are your thoughts? Do you expect them to be as overt?
I think in some cases you'll see them being more overt because there's the absence of Roscosmos here this year. The Russians are not here. And so all of these peaceful agreements for use of space, the things that have been able to bring companies together to encourage collaboration, they're all being put into question right now.
Right.
You have questions like the European Space Agency wondering, will the Russians be a reliable partner in the future, or do they really need to move forward and start new partnerships with commercial firms?
They're moving forward. They've already said that with ExoMars, so they're depending on them for a Proton launch. This very expensive mission's already been delayed twice, and they've said they're not going to go forward with Russia at this point. They're looking at alternatives. So there is a disruption to companies and agencies that had missions slated to fly on Russian rockets. Long term, I don't think anybody's going to miss the rockets. They're not going to have much of an industry left if the temperature changes and they're allowed to crawl back into the fold.
And you're seeing, this is an immediate opportunity for every firm out here. The absence of having the Soyuz vehicle and for those relaunches that they've been counting on, you see companies like Sierra Space saying, we have a space plane, it's going to test next year, and other companies will follow suit.
Yeah. We are in a very different environment than we were just a few short years ago. Because again, all along these aisles here are options, options, options. And it's very interesting when Saturday's announcement from Roscosmos, Rogozin came out that we're pulling out of the station. I'm sure there are a lot of speechwriters who have had to recraft what they were planning on maybe saying here, and they're probably still having to do some of that because it's such a dynamic environment. I think you will see a number of commercial companies here that are going to step up and say, where they step out, we will step in. And I think you've already seen some of those overtures. I think you're going to see some other voices that are going to raise themselves here in this conversation. And
the geopolitical implications of this will continue. We'll have moon landings in the next year, the next year after that. And you have the moon agreement, you have, the peaceful operations in space, but will there really be good actors, faithful actors who will all adhere to this, or is there going to be one set of rules for one group and one set of rules for the other?
We have many sets of rules right now, and then therefore no rules, right? You raise an excellent point, though, and the problem we have with space relations is there's not a lot of transparency from China as a major space actor or as Russia as a major space actor. The backdrop to this war in Ukraine was Russia launched a missile to destroy one of its satellites to show that it can hit something in orbit, right? It was never in any doubt, but there's kind of a flagrant disregard for orbital safety, and that's becoming
including their own crew issue on board the space
station. Exactly.
It will be interesting to see, though, what the counter of the Artemis Accords will be. And again, whether that does take shape. Now, again, we've seen the China Belt and Road Initiative. They've done a lot of work there in developing emerging nations, having them buy into their GPS systems, launch systems. So we're going to see. So we've got a lot for national security that's going to occur today. But there's also a lot of business that's occurring. Yesterday, there was a big announcement that has been made that you guys have been covering relating to Amazon. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, so Amazon put 83 launches in its shopping cart. A lot of these are pre-orders because the rockets...
Is there a prime discount?
I think there probably is a prime discount. There has to be a volume discount if you're buying 83 launches divided between 3 providers. So the providers are Blue Origin, United Launch Alliance, and Arianespace. All these rockets that Amazon has bought for the launching of its 3,000 Project Kuiper broadband satellites, they haven't flown yet. Vulcan and Ariane 6 are slated to fly this year. New Glenn, not going to fly until next year at the earliest. And it takes a little while for new rockets to ramp up to any sort of kind of
mature
steady cadence, right? So it's doable in the long term, but they're talking about 5 years, up to 83 launches. So I think what we'll find is, what is that? That's like 16 a year. That should be doable between those 3 companies.
And again, I think it was your reporting 3,236 satellites to go up with that. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Check your source. Okay. Well, business obviously is one other piece, but there's also a lot of other news that's going on. In fact, right now in the media center, Steve Isakowitz, the president and CEO of the Aerospace Corporation, is making an announcement, and he'll be doing this also from the main stage today, about what is called the DEI Pledge, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. 24 companies have signed up for that. With that announcement, that is an effort by this community to do even better, to broaden its workforce, diversify its workforce. And again, we know this industry can and is looking to do better. We'll have more on that in our afternoon show, but Steve Isakowitz will be on the stage, main stage this afternoon, talking about that. But that's another piece of news that we'll be developing here. As we go to sort of wrap up, I'm going to ask each of you, what's the story you're looking for today that we haven't already sort of discussed? And share any other thoughts you have about the opening of Symposium.
Well, as a Pentagon correspondent, I'd be remiss to not mention hypersonics and the huge role they have played in turning everybody's head to the potential new threats from space. How do you counter them? You know, you've seen the SDA move forward with its agreement for the low tranche, low Earth orbit satellites. You know, how do you defend against this next, kind of generation of weapon? What sort of infrastructure is needed? I think there'll be a lot of interest here on that.
Yeah. Definitely hypersonics. I think with NASA Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, she's the senior NASA official at the Space Symposium this year. We're going to see her talk about ISS, well, she'll acknowledge that they have contingency plans if they have to go it alone without Russian support. They won't get into a lot of detail about what that's about. They're going to talk a little bit more about Artemis, the Artemis Accords, and trying to set rules of the road for doing exploration of the cislunar system. So I'm waiting to see what she has to say today.
Well, again, while there's a lot occurring here, we obviously have the wet dress rehearsal that's going on with SLS. We have the Axiom crew that's going up later this week. We have another commercial crew that's going up shortly after that. There is not a shortage of space news that is occurring every day, whether that be here at Symposium or around the world. But we're going to cover what's happening here for Symposium. We'll have an afternoon wrap-up to talk about some of the other highlights that are coming out there. And again, what we would encourage you, our virtual audience, obviously engage us on social media. We have all of those social media handles that we can put up on the screen here momentarily. And there it is, like magic, how about that? But again, want you to be able to follow the story of what's going on. Please take a look at the reporting that's going on with Tara Kopp at Defense One, as well as Brian and his team at Space News. There's always news to be had. We at Space Foundation are going to do what we can to, again, inform, educate, and collaborate in bringing parties together to talk about that global space ecosystem, because that's our mission. So we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you very much. Have a great day.